Today you are going to be doing 8.9, which is all about volume. You learned about volume last year, but we're going to learn a different formula today because last year you just learned about rectangular prisms, and now we're doing all prisms, and so there's a different formula for those. So today we will learn how to find the volume of prisms, and volume is the amount of space occupied by any three-dimensional solid. So it's the amount of space that it takes up. Okay, so if we wanted to know how many boxes we could fit into a big box, we would need to find the volume of the big box to figure out how much space it has that it takes up. So that is volume. So our formula for volume of prisms is V equals capital B times little h. So V equals big B times h. Now, if you remember, the big B is different than the little b. Okay, when it's capitalized, that means area of base. And remember, we used that when we did surface area the other day. So the capital B is the area of the base, and then the h is just your height. So the old formula that you guys used to use, or that we used last year, was V equals length times width times height. So that is still the formula for rectangular prisms, but if you think about it, if you have length times width, that's area of a rectangle, right? So that's why that length times width, we change that to capital B because that's just area of the base. And then you multiply it by the height. So you're finding the area of the base and then you're multiplying by the height is what we're doing. Okay, but we're using the V equals big B times h. So when we look at this first example, these first two are triangular prisms, and we know that they're triangular prisms because the base is a triangle and we can't see it, but the back would be a triangle as well. So it's a prism if it has two identical bases, and it's triangular prism if both of the bases are triangles. So we want to know the area of this base. So our formula is still V equals capital B times h. And this B, that is the area of the base. So since our base is a triangle, we have to use the triangle formula, which is 1/2 times base times height. That's how we find the area of our triangular base. So that's what's going to go in parentheses when I solve this. So I'm going to have my parentheses, and I'm going to have 1/2, and then the base of my triangle is 11, and the height of my triangle is 10. So in the parentheses, we're going to have 1/2 times 11 times 10, and that's going to get me the area of that triangle. And then we multiply by the height of the prism, which is 15. So keep in mind that this is our capital B, and the 15 is our h. Lowercase h, though. And then you just solve that. So if I wanted to find the area of the base, I would do 1/2 times 11 times 10. Remember, 1/2 times 10, or half of 10, that's 5. 5 times 11 is 55. So that means the area of my base is 55. And then I want to multiply by 15 to figure out the volume. So I would do 55 times 15 in my calculator. And you would get 825, it should not be pink, 825 centimeters, and its volume, so our answer is cubed. And that's our answer. So if it's asking for area of the base, that's what the 15 is, and we multiply by the height of the prism to get 825 centimeters cubed, which is the volume. So every time you're just finding the area of the base and then multiplying it by the height of the prism. So on this one, we're using our V equals big B times little h. And then our base is still a triangle, so I know that for the area of the base, I have to do 1/2 times base times height. So the base of my triangle is 15, so I'm going to have in parentheses 1/2 times 15, and then the height of my triangle is 4. So we get 1/2 times 15 times 4, which will tell us the area of the base, and then we'll multiply by 30 because that's our height. So remember, the height is not always going vertically. It's just the height connects the two bases together. It stretches the bases. And then you solve this. So I know that 1/2 of 4 is 2, and then 2 times 15 is 30. So I get 30 on the inside of the parentheses, and then I multiply by 30 on the outside, which is our height. And you can put this in your calculator, but you should know 3 times 3 is 9. And then you have those zeros at the end, so you would add those, and so it would be 900, and it would be millimeters cubed is our answer. Okay. So this capital B, that is like having a formula within a formula, because the area of the base, we have to use the area formula to find the volume. So on these next two questions, these are rectangular prisms. So these are a little bit different because we could use any face we wanted. Okay? Because the top, it has an identical face at the bottom. The side, this right side, has an identical side over on the left side. So I could use either of those. And then the front, which is this one right here, is the same as the back of it. Okay, going all the way down. So rectangular prisms are different because there's not just a set two bases you can use any of them. But, so I'm just going to use the top up there to start with. So we have V equals big B times little h. To find the area of the base, I have to look at it. So the area, or the base, is a rectangle. So that means that is just length times width. That's how I find the area of a rectangle. Okay. So in my parentheses, I'm going to be multiplying length times width, which the length is 3 and the width is 2. So in the parentheses, we have 3 times 2. We do not use a half. We only multiply by 1/2 when it is a triangle. So we do 3 times 2 to get the base, and then we multiply by the height of the rectangular prism, which is 22. So we get 3 times 2 times 22. Well, 3 times 2 is 6, and then 6 times 22, you can do it in your calculator, and you should get 132 centimeters cubed would be our answer. So notice, we could have done the same thing if we would have used, let's say, this right side as our base, because that would have been, in parentheses, it would have been 22 times 2, and then on the outside, the height would have been 3, and so it would just been 22 times 2 times 3. It's the exact same numbers as what we did, they're just in a different order, okay, which would get you the same answer. You'd get 132 centimeters cubed. So you can use any face when you have rectangular prisms. Okay. So ignore my phone because that's what I'm going to do. On this example, it's still a rectangular prism, so I want you to try it on your own and then pause the video and then fast forward to see if you got the correct answer. So we have V equals big B times little h. It's a rectangular prism, so you can choose any face that you want. So I'm just going to use this top right here. And to get the area of the base, you would do, it's a rectangle, so you just do length times width again. So area of the base is going to be 12 times 2. And that's what goes in parentheses. And then our height is 10. Okay. If you chose a different base, that is perfectly fine. We will still get the same answer as long as you did it correctly. So 12 times 2 is 24. And then we multiply that by the height, and the height is 10. So 24 times 10 is 240 centimeters cubed. That is your answer. So keep in mind that this 24, that is the area of the base, and then you're multiplying it by the height, which is 10. And that's how we get 240 centimeters cubed. Next, flip your page over. And now we have cylinders, which should bring you back to what you did last class with finding area and circumference of circles. So when we do these, to find the area of a circle, our formula is A equals pi r squared. We're going to use that every time you have a circle. So my formula for volume is still V equals big B times little h. But my area, or my base, is a circle. So that means to find the area of the base, we have to use pi times r times squared. That's what's going to get us the big B. So when we solve this, I know I'm going to have pi in my parentheses, which is 3.14. And then I have to find my radius. So looking at this 4, that's my diameter because it goes all the way across. Remember, radius, we want it to just go halfway. So we got to find half of 4, which is 2. So we'd get 3.14 times 2 squared. That's how we find the area of the base. And then you have to multiply it by the height, which is 20. So that would be what we solve. So we'd get 3.14 times 2 squared, which is 12 56 hundredths. So that's the area of the base. And then we have to multiply it by the height, which is 20. And we would get 251 2/10, and it would still be centimeters cubed because it is volume. Alright, so if you want, try this on your own. The only difference is that instead of giving the diameter, it's giving us the radius, so you just plug that number into your formula. So we have V equals big B times little h. And so to find the area of the base, it is going to be pi times r squared. So pi is 3.14 times our radius, which is 7.2. We don't need to divide it by 2 or anything. So we get 3.14 times 7.2 squared, and you multiply it by your height, which is 3 2/10. And then you solve that. So when I do 3.14 times 7.2 squared, you get a decimal that goes into 4 decimal places. So I'm going to round that to the tenths. So it'd be 162 8/10. And then you multiply that by 3 2/10. And you would get 520 96 hundredths centimeters cubed. If you round that, it would be 520. I'm making a video. Okay. You can look. Okay, so it's 521 centimeters cubed. All right, last 2 examples. So this one is a cube, which hopefully you know that means all edges are 14. So that's 14, that's 14, that's 14. Every edge is 14 millimeters. So when we solve this, we still use V equals big B times little h. And to find the area of the base is a square, so I'm just going to use length times width. So then in my parentheses, I would do length times width, which is 14 times 14. And then you would multiply it by your height, which is also 14. So 14 times 14 is 196. And then 196 times 14 is 2,744 millimeters cubed. Now, you can multiply 14 times 14 times 14 all in your calculator all at once. You could do that for all of these. Back here, you could have put this whole thing into your calculator at once. I'm just showing you that 162.8 is the base, is the area of the base, and then we're multiplying it by the height. So that's why I'm doing it that way, but you can multiply just straight across all in one fell swoop. On this one, same formula, so V equals big B times little h. So to find the area of the base, if we look at our base, it is a triangle, which means we have to use our triangle formula, which is 1/2 times B times h. Notice when we're finding area, it is a lowercase b. When we're finding volume, it is an uppercase b. Notice the difference. So in my parentheses, I'm going to have 1/2 times my base, which is 9 9/10. And then my height is 4 6/10. So I'm going to do 1/2 times 9.9 times 4.6 in parentheses, and then we multiply that by our height, which is 12. So you can put that whole thing in your calculator to get your answer. Okay? But if we just did 1/2 times 9.9 times 4.6, we would get 22 77/100. And then when you multiply that by 12, you get 273 24/100 meters cubed. And that would be your final answer. So now you're going to work on a partner worksheet. If you want to work by yourself, you can. It's up to you. But your partner worksheet is going to look like this. There's 10 problems. I have an example done for you. Notice that it says base formula. So you are not going to put the formula as V equals capital B times H. That is not the formula to find the base. The formula to find the area of the base is either A equals 1/2 times base times height, like this one, or it's length times width, or it's A equals pi times r squared. Those are the three options for this column. Okay, it doesn't want the volume formula. It wants how do you find the area of the base. And then you're actually going to solve it in this column. Okay, so you would solve it like we did here. So the area formula was 1/2 times 6 times 3, and then we solved it there, and then that's the answer that goes for the area of the base, and then you put your height, and then you multiply them to get your volume. So exactly what we just did, it's just having you break it down a little bit more. Remember, if there's no label, it is units. Okay, make sure you label. Area will be squared, volume will be cubed. And then just go through there, solve those 10, and then when you're done, you can work on IXL recommendations or any NHIs. Email me if you guys have any questions.